All right, welcome back to Operator Syndrome. Um, Today we have another honored guest, Steve Brown. Really thankful for him taking the time to come on the show. Steve is a SEAL brother. He his career is pretty distinguished. Although he probably doesn't want me to blow a lot of smoke like most people who have distinguished careers, but he was a little bit after my time, but saw a lot of action. Was stationed at SDV, SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1 for a number of years, and then moved on to Dev Group as an operator for close to 10 years, I believe. And then he saw a lot of combat. I'm a dinosaur. The Gulf War wasn't even really that much of a war. It was just kind of a blip, but I know he's fought hard, won the Silver Star, which is a big deal. Multiple Bronze Stars. You were a sniper too, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Yes, sniper. And then spent some meaningful time up in Det Kodiak, which is it's the West Coast. Okay, I'm speaking from a lot of years ago. It was the West Coast Winter Warfare School up in Kodiak, Alaska, the island, Kodiak Island. And I thought it would be funny to just talk about that place. I went there twice with SEAL Team 5 on two different platoons. And back then it was not as developed and refined. I'm Steve has taken it. I mean, he knows a whole lot about survival, cold weather, hunting, all that good stuff. But back then, I just remember, and I'll throw it over to Steve. When we landed the first time, we landed at a Coast Guard base in a C-130. We get out, and I'm just I had my first time to Alaska, so I was just overwhelmed by the beauty of the place. I just striking. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. I walked out. I don't know what I was doing. We were on the tarmac there, getting off the plane, and I look over, and there's like a bay area, and a freaking eagle or something, an osprey, or it was a big bird, just comes swooping down and grabs a fish like right out of the bay. And I'm like, wow, welcome to Alaska. It was just a magical experience. But yeah, just what were your some of your memories of Kodiak and memorable things that happened there?
Yeah, so like you, I was kind of in the older days where, I went up there twice with task units from SDV Team 1 to do winter warfare. And I just, the place is, the terrain, the topography, the wild of it, the untouched areas of it. I mean, you get 5 minutes out of town and it's like you're 500 miles from anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I just always had this like really drive to go back there in some other capacity.
Mm.
And so yeah, I did end up going back up there to be the senior enlisted advisor. And so when I went back, it was had completely changed. So it wasn't just platoons coming up there anymore. Now it was part of the pipeline for SQT. So every Bud's class, once they would start SQT, would end up there at some point in time in that pipeline. I changed a couple times while I was up there, and just kind of kept developing the curriculum that we were able to offer up there, and getting the instructors to a level where they could really be experts in that environment, and then pass that as much of that knowledge as they can down to the student level, which is difficult to do because it's such a non-standard skill set for
Yeah.
within the teams. And so we would send guys to all kinds of climbing schools and avalanche courses and snow machine courses, and just try to build that knowledge. Because when we'd get a new instructor, I mean, he'd show up there basically with what he learned in SQT.
Oh yeah.
So, and that's, you can't have someone at the level that the student's going to get to really teach them, and really, they're only teaching them to the level that they know. So we had a really solid staff. Then we started incorporating doing our own senior mountaineering course and master mountaineering course, which after I left, the senior mountaineering course started. Our mountaineering curriculum within the SQT piece, we made it so that every student would be qualified as a basic mountaineer under SOCOM standards. And so when they would go work with other units within SOCOM,
Hmm.
You know, you can say, hey, we got 13 basic mountaineers, which that means the senior and the master mountaineer know exactly their capabilities. So it was cool watching that progression and seeing how we could get guys more integrated with other units when they're downrange. But it was the terrain there, man. It's such a mind. I want to say some words here that I can't, but
Go, feel free. We do. Yeah.
okay, it's a total mind fuck because
Yeah.
you have so much micro terrain,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's hilarious. You'll be on a 3-day like patrol out in the mountains with the students, and you'll might be back by rear security, it might be up on point. It just depends. But I remember this one time I was back with the rear security guys, and they're just like, yeah, it should just be like over that next ridge. Well,
Oh,
there's so many false summits. So they would get up to that and they'd see their patrol just still going. And they're just like, they're just back there bitching, bitching at the point man, like, what is wrong with this guy? Why can't he figure out where we're going? And blah, 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 blah. And I mean, I was a point man pretty much throughout my entire career. So I feel for the guy that's up there in the front trying to figure out where he's going and
yeah.
trying to do it the best way possible, knowing that there's dudes behind him that have a lot more weight than what he's carrying.
Right.
And they're just getting more and more fired up. And I was just
Uh-huh.
like, so then you just throw the question out, like, would you guys like to take over point 3 or point man or
Yeah.
something like that? And then they just kind of like shut up because they
Yeah.
don't really
Yeah.
know where they're at anyways. But yeah, that terrain can really make or break you and
Yeah,
like
man.
really because psychologically, I mean, as far as instructors go, we all know the routes and,
Yeah.
we've done them over and
Yeah.
over. So we know it's like, all right, it's 2 more ridge lines and we're there.
Yeah.
Where these students, man, they're just like, okay, because on a map or anything you're looking at, it's like, okay, we got 2 like major ridge lines, but they're
Right.
counting every single little micro ridge line too. And
Right.
it's
Oh
just like,
man.
why aren't we there yet? So that was usually pretty funny, just listening to them like bitch about that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And it was cool. I mean, you're taking some of these kids that have never been in the wilderness like that before, that's maybe grew up in a city, and next thing you know, you're teaching them how to process out an animal.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
you'd ask the class as a whole, like, how many of you guys have ever like hunted before? And you'd get a few hands. How many of you
Yeah.
ever processed out an animal before? You'd get fewer hands. And this is
Right.
like, man, these are some basic life skills that we as a society are just losing big time.
Totally.
But you see it like kind of coming back a little bit now because everybody's kind of getting paranoid about,
Yeah.
I don't know, just the infrastructure collapsing, and I need to support myself and have my own
Yeah.
farm and have my own, so
Yeah.
hopefully those guys all took some of those lessons. And like we were talking
Yeah.
about earlier, where we know guys that have done that. I mean, hell, I'm one. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have a garden yet, but I mean, I got goats to help take care
Yeah.
of this place and that kind of thing. So the meat
Yeah.
never became a shortage, and I got deer all over the place and turkeys
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. For those out there listening, we're both, well, there's 3, well, there's more than that actually, but three former team guys in this relatively same area, central Kentucky, South Central. I'm in South Central. And I mean, nobody's going to go hungry here if the whole ship balloon goes up.
No,
We're going
that's for
to be
sure.
eating fine. But yeah, I was thinking when I was at up in Kodiak at Winter Warfare, I remember I was a point man and getting cursed by everybody, and that's so funny. Yeah, I just want to throw it back to him and go, all right, you think you could do better? I mean, it's just brutal. I remember the first we were out in a really cold. We were up in the hills. I can't even remember where. It was up there, and it was, I mean, freakishly cold. And I just remember thinking to and we were doing the snow caves. Did you guys do those?
Yep.
Yeah.
When the weather permitted, like
Well,
if it
right.
was a summer class, then probably not. But yeah,
Sure.
we would. And I got something to say about snow caves when you get that just brought back a thought. But when you
Yeah.
finish,
Yeah. No. Well, we had a guy almost. Well, I think there were 3 or 4 guys in each snow cave. I think that's how we did it. I remember at least 3 of us in there. We broke up the patrol into like 3s or 4s, and one group almost died. Like the dude, you know how you got to keep
vent
the
hole.
hole, yeah, the vent
Yeah.
hole, and he went to sleep and iced over,
Oh,
and
jeez.
by God's grace, man, they woke up, and like one of them woke up and was like out of his mind, like lethargic, and pushed the packs out of the way. and all this air rushed in, and he just started puking. And I was
Jeez.
like, God, you guys were like not that far from all being dead. But
Yeah.
I guess my bigger point was like my thought was up there and that kind of cold is like, man, fuck me. If we have to fight in this weather, I don't know how that's gonna go. But
Yeah.
did
Well,
you yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, I can say our equipment and clothing systems have come a long, long, long way.
Yeah.
Where now you can, I mean, it's not difficult to thrive in that environment. So, I mean, we've taken everything from like our base layer to our sleeping bag, and we turn that into one system. So
Oh yeah.
you're utilizing that whole system to help you dry out while you sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
people are like, dude, what? And it's like,
Oh yeah.
so to test this theory, we have the students go and immerse themselves in a lake,
Mhm.
usually, or the ocean, just depends on what the sea state's like.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we're breaking ice to get them in the lake, and they get out, they go in the water for a certain period of time. We got some hypothermia tables, so we can get them pretty close to where they're cold, and we know that they're cold. And then they get out, and as pairs, they set up a tent. They get their sleeping bags in there. They boil some water. They reconstitute like a mountain house meal.
Yeah.
And while they're in their sleeping bags inside this tent and they're eating, you all of a sudden they'll have their tent door vented, and all of a sudden you just see all this water vapor just pouring out of that thing. I mean,
Wow.
it's amazing how it's just flowing out of that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, our clothing systems are so much better than they were
Wow.
back in the day when we first went up there.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, man, it was
Oh
just terrible back. You were totally muscling through it back then.
yeah.
But one of the things I was going to mention about snow caves, so there's this one class we did, and we had this really nice gully. There's a huge drift in it, so we broke them up. And these SQT classes are pretty big. I mean, I think like 70 was like one of the larger numbers we had. I think this was one around 40 or 50.
Mm-hmm.
So we broke them up into teams and had them all do snow caves into this massive drift. And the rest of the instructors were all out getting kind of our tents and stuff set up and everything for the evening. And we went back and checked them all out. And there's still, a few hours of light left. And so we kind of let the students kind of just go and just live in the environment. We weren't like sitting there micromanaging them. We were just letting them do their thing.
Yeah.
Well, they ended up connecting every snow cave. So so you'd go in through any entrance of the snow cave, and there was one gigantic freaking cavern of like, it was badass. Yeah,
That's
it was pretty cool. Yeah. And but I was just like, that's pretty interesting. But you could have put that whole class inside that thing. It
wow.
was crazy.
That is
It was
amazing. I
crazy
never
big.
thought of anything like that in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, big, yeah, complex of
Yeah. Yeah,
interconnected.
it was
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
But
yeah, by the way, for our listeners out there, Steve, they had a feature article in a magazine called Frank the Magazine. I guess that's a Frankfort, Frank
yeah,
from Frankfurt.
it's a county magazine. They kind of
Yeah.
highlight things around the county.
Yeah, and for our listeners, if you want a copy of this, I've got a PDF. Just email us, Patrick and myself, at operator syndrome podcast at gmail.com, and I'll just fire you one. I mean, no cost or nothing like that, but it gives a good sketch of Steve's background and just what he's doing now, which we're kind of gonna get into. But I was gonna ask you one other thing. In 2010, you kind of were at a low point, and
Yeah.
this is what the article says, so I don't think I'm divulging anything too personal, but
Right.
there was an event that happened, a hunting event that kind of transformed you in a way. It sounded like it didn't go into a
It
lot.
did.
Yeah, you want to tell us about that a little bit, just briefly?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, while my time at Damnick, I just, like you said, did a lot. I'd lost a lot of close teammates. And I was I didn't realize where I was in my headspace until I got up to Alaska, and I actually had time to kind of reflect and think. And I just went downhill really fast.
Yeah.
And, had suicidal ideation, kind of figured out what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, where I was going to go do it. I just didn't know when. There's a lot of things there's a few things preventing me from doing it. Like, who would find me? That was probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
And that kind of kept my head above water. And then I put in for a brown bear hunt on the island in an area where a couple guys recommended that I put put in for that certain game managed area. And fortunately was drawn like the first time I ever put in for one. And just everything just kind of fell into place. Like a buddy of mine that was going to go on the hunt with me from the det, he knew a guy that had a cabin out in that area. The guy with the cabin was like, hey, if I can go on the hunt, you guys can just stay at my cabin. So we went out there a couple days early. You got to get there by boat or by plane. And so we went by boat, got out there, kind of just walked a little bit around. We didn't go too far, just kind of went up on a ridgeline one day and did some classing in some areas and didn't see anything. And then it was opening day, and the three of us, we hike up. There's myself and the other two. And so one of them was going to video while the other one was going to be the backup shooter. And then because up there the bears are big and you want to drop them fast and you don't want a wounded animal like taking off in the alder, like then you got to go after them, you know, and that's never they're big. So so we went up on this ridgeline and we glassed down. There's two bears down in the river. They're fishing, and I'm like, hey, do they look like they're average sized bears? And the guy's like, yeah, they're average. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go get one. So we proceed to go down. Well, we went and got some chest waders, and because we had to cross a bunch of rivers. And so we went and did that. And then basically this turned into about a 6-hour stalk or a 6.5-hour stalk. And in the meantime, those bears are fishing, going up in the alder, taking a nap. The other bear went up there and like fought the other bear for a little bit. And the first one that took a nap took off, and second one crashed out. And then it came back out, but it was like 700 yards away at this point. And I was like, I was good at taking a shot at that far, 600-700, you know. But the other guy with me was just like, nah, I'll be better off like 200-300. And I'm like, all right, well, we got time. This is opening day. We got 2 weeks. So we're kind of, the sun's getting ready to go down, and we're like, all right, well, let's pack up. Let's head back up to the cabin, you know, get to bed early, get up early, be back down in the spot before the sun even starts to come up, and just, you know, hopefully they're right back in the same spot fishing, because it's only like a 25-yard shot, which I would hope they would be a little bit further than that. But
yeah, right.
You know, if that is what it is. But so we start walking out, and I look back, and this bear is now coming down the river towards the direction that we were at. And so I was like, hey, fellas, I think he might make it down here before it gets, you know, too dark to shoot. So I go back to where I was at. Those two guys get back up to me a few minutes later. It's now within about 300 yards, but there's no good shot because there's too much alder between the bear and ourselves. It jumps in on their salmon, it goes into an alder bush and eats it, and then starts coming down the river again. And so I range this corner that he's coming to, and it's 200 yards. And I'm like, well, I'm going to drill him right in the shoulder as soon as he comes to that point. And so as soon as he gets there, he turns and comes straight on me. And I'm like, the only shot I have is like a headshot. And I'm like, I'm not taking that, because that's what you're after, is that skull, you know, the hide and everything. And
right.
And so I'm just sitting there watching him through my scope. And finally I see that front right paw go way out to the right. And then I'm like, okay, that left one's going to come over and give me that shot I want. And so it did. As soon as this paw hit the bottom of the river, I cracked him, spun him around, and he fell like, he couldn't have fallen any better. He fell basically chest just right towards us, screaming to us, like, put as many rounds into me as you can right now. And so we did. So we put in 7 more rounds into him.
Yeah.
And we got it all on video, and it was just like, wow, that was awesome. But like with any hunt, it's like, wow, now the real work begins, because we're like, that's a good sized bear. It's starting to get dark, and bears in Alaska are attracted to gunfire. So, because somehow they learned that you're not allowed to defend anything that you kill up there if a bear decides to get on it.
Oh, wow.
So now it's like, okay, we got like one dude on watch. Well, first we walk up to this thing and we're like, holy shit, this thing's like the size of a Volkswagen Bug. It was huge.
It was a record, wasn't it?
It was the largest bear taken in the state in 2010. And I'm not sure exactly where it falls out on Boone and Crockett anymore, because it's been quite a few years since then. But yeah, so we get this thing all fleshed out and everything, and well, skinned out, not fleshed out yet. And then now we're like, because we're guessing this thing at the time is probably about 1,400 pounds. And like it took 3 of us to drag the hide up onto the shore. Like
Lord.
so we're like, and all I brought was a backpack frame and some 550 cord to like roll up a hide and strap it to that and like hike out. And we're like, there's no way that's happening. And we're like looking at trees. We're like, can we build a litter? How can we do this? And then one of the guys is like, well, why don't we float it down the river? And I'm like, all right, that's a good idea. And so I took the 550 from the backpack frame and wrapped it around. The skull is still inside the hide, so I wrapped it around that a bunch of times and tied it off really good. And then by now it's dark, so we're on headlamps and doing all this and still watching for other bears to come in on us, still have someone always like on watch. And so I just tie this thing to me, like, because I'm still at that point in my life. I'm like, I really didn't care. I just tied this thing to my wrist where it could not come off of me. Because if I let go of this thing, it's gone. And that river goes right out into a bay that goes out into the Gulf of Alaska, which goes into the Pacific Ocean. Not I'm saying it would go that far, but it'd probably get at least out into that bay and just be gone. And so I'm just like, after we got back, it was straight line distance, a mile that we had to cover in this zigzagging river, which took an hour to do. And I just asked one of them to be on either side of the river. Like, just keep your head, if I go underwater, just keep your headlamps on the top of the water so I can at least see where the surface is as I'm running along the bottom, because I'm not going to be able to come back up until this bear gets me to where I can come back up. And so I went under twice and, obviously came back up twice and then finally and then there'd be shallows. So I'd get my chest waders emptied back out again and then just start dragging this thing over rocks, and that would kind of warm me back up. By the time we got to where we could get an ATV to it, I was pretty damn near hypothermic, because it's October in Alaska and that water's not warm. So finally got him out, and then that hunt I look back at it years later, just kind of reflecting on it, and I was just like, man, that was really the hand that started to pull me out of my hole that I was in. And which is why I ended up naming this Camp Brown Bear. Because I get that question all the time too, because it's kind of an odd name for a camp to bring a bunch of veterans out to. But yeah, so that was kind of what started it out for me getting better. And then of course, Extortion 17 happened about 6 months later. And then that was another nosedive again. I had quite a few friends on that bird. And then, again, I just started thinking and processing, and I was just like, I can beat this, like I just got to keep myself busy. I got to find purpose. I need to, and that's why I was still in. This is like trying to find purpose while you're still in. You got plenty of purpose. So I understand why when guys get out, when they don't have that purpose, it's like really easy for them to really stumble and fall into a hole. Which is, why one of the main reasons I started doing what I'm doing is just when I first started this camp, it was bringing vets out to help me renovate it, because we're going to start a fatherless boys middle school age, like primitive living land navigation school. And so they're like, okay, we're helping kids. That gave them sense of purpose. And like we saw a lot of guys that came out here that were completely suicidal. Some had multiple suicide attempts. And after coming out here a few times, next thing you hear is like, yeah, I'm back at school. I'm getting my master's degree in art. I'm going to be an art teacher. I'm going to teach in high school. And, like stories like that. And it's like another buddy of mine, he has been to pretty much every retreat we've done, because about 3 years into doing them, he started his own nonprofit because he figured out his sense of purpose was to help veterans. And he takes them canoeing and kayaking with camping involved. And then that evolved into doing multi-day offshore sailing trips out of Key West on 2 56-foot sailboats. So it's helped. That's just two of the people who's helped. There's been a lot, and it's so working out here every day, it's like, one, it's super peaceful and quiet. So I've got that. I'm not working for somebody. I'm doing it the way that I want to do it. And obviously I change things. If I see something that doesn't work, especially if it's within the retreat, we change it and we do micro corrections. We don't do anything like drastic. So we want to make sure when we do a change, it's one thing that we're changing. If that didn't work, okay, let's try something else the next time. But we've got a good formula now, and really I've been trying to share it with other organizations, because like we will announce that we have a retreat and we will fill it up within 24 hours. And if I don't take down the application for it, I'll have enough people signed up for 2 to 3 retreats.
Yeah.
And then even when I do take it down, people keep signing up, even though there's no
Awesome.
retreat. They just
Yeah.
keep signing up. I mean, we got a 1-year waiting list now for our female retreats. We got a 9-month waiting list for our couples retreats. The guys are a little easier to do because there's so many other opportunities out there for male veterans.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's been so as far as sense of purpose, this place keeps me so busy. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
definitely a 60-hour week's probably average when we have retreats. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's add another probably 40 hours to that 60 that week. So
Man, it's inspiring to see brothers just doing stuff like this. The reason we call our podcast Operator Syndrome is because it's a real thing. I mean, the medical
right.
community has identified a network of symptoms and problems that all these operators have, and we just in any way, like what I've seen. Okay, I'll back up a little bit. Was I got out in '93 to show you how old I am. And then I went to
I won't
college.
tell you when I came in then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went to grad school. I became a minister. That gave me some purpose. I got burned out on that. And then I came back in the Navy. I got commissioned as a chaplain. And the weird, that's weird because, I was the only former team guide chaplain walking around, and ended up at Dev Group as supporting the command chaplain there. Reported on board on August 1 of 2011, and the bird went down on August 6th, extortion 17.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe, because I had been out for so long, I could not believe the brokenness of our veterans. And I mean, we're talking the toughest dudes on the planet, and they're falling apart one
Yeah.
after another. And of course, that didn't help. That event was just like, I don't even want to think about it really.
Right.
But what I've noticed is that, and Patrick and I've been digging. Patrick's a former Ranger. He saw a lot more action than I ever did in my time. But that things that give us purpose, helping other vets, even help like teaching, being a role model for kids is great. And so I want to just say, I mean, transitioning into what Steve's doing at Camp Brown Bear right here in Kentucky. I've been up to see the place. It's beautiful. It's secluded, but it's close enough to stuff that's kind of cool to do, like the Bourbon Trail. It's like the best of both worlds, because you feel like you're out in God's country, which you are, and it's a beautiful part of the state. I mean, I'm kind of in that same area. I'm a little south of where he is, but what he's doing is these retreats, and just bringing veterans. It's all paid for, so veterans are not out any money. They just show up. And I would like to. This is something we could probably talk about offline, but I worked for about 6 years doing a jogging for frogmen in Louisville. We raised about 150,000 for the Navy SEAL Foundation, and it's like that kind of was the thing that kept me coming back every year. With COVID, it kind of went away. It's a long story, but I'm thinking about. Have you heard of the Bone Frog Open golf tournament?
I have, yes.
I was thinking about something we could talk about, not getting in too far into that. It was like, I was wondering, I have a friend who's good at organizing golf events to raise money for Camp Brown Bear, and maybe here in Kentucky call it the Bone Frog Masters or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
right.
I would also like to put a plug out. Okay, so how do people how can they give to your organization? It's a 501c3 nonprofit.
It is, yes.
And
It's and not only that, all of us are volunteers, so nobody gets paid here. So
right.
every cent that goes to this organization goes to its programming. So which makes a big difference, because our annual budget is less than typically a director at another nonprofit. So
Yeah.
we are probably, I would be willing to bet that we are probably one of the lowest cost causes out there that are really helping veterans and doing things for veterans. Because you hear a lot of organizations say, we're raising money for veterans. Okay, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, I mean, are you just raising money and then you're giving it to somebody else to try to do something, or are you actually doing it?
Yeah.
But so, yeah, to help us on our website, that's probably the easiest place to go, which is www.campbrownbearusa.org. And there's a donate button. That then takes you to a page where you have 3 options of a one-time donation, a recurring donation, or you can just give us your spare change every month and do the roundup donation, which you enter a debit or credit card, and you can set a limit from $10 up to $100. And so anytime you use that card, it rounds up to the next dollar. That money, that change goes to that amount that you set. Once you reach that set amount, it stops for the month, and then it continues in the following month. But that's really the ways to do it. Or, I mean, obviously we've got our mailing address on our website as well. If you're more comfortable sending a check, the address is right there. But, yeah.
And I'm assuming too, if people want to come and work, labor wise,
as a volunteer.
Yeah.
We have a lot of volunteers that come out. Obviously, our entire staff are volunteers. Our board people are volunteers. So we usually get a lot of work out of them. We've got groups from Clark Equipment. They're a forklift company out of Lexington. They're out this year. Jim Beam comes out here quite a bit.
Yeah.
We get units from the National Guard base that's right down the road from us that come out here to help us out. We just had a group from AmeriCorps, which is a federally funded program. They had 8 young adults, 19 to 25, I believe was their range. They were out here helping us out with the project, and for about 3.5 weeks. Last year we had another group from them. They're out here for about 2 months. So we get we're always looking for volunteers to come out and help with projects and things like that. I mean, even if it's just coming out the week before the retreat on like a Tuesday or Wednesday and just walking through the cabins and making sure that they're clean and everything's ready to go. And if it's a couples retreat, a couple beds are like strapped together, so they make one like king size bed as opposed to all twin beds in the cabins. And then same thing if it's a male or female retreat, just making sure everything's all single twins at that point in time. Just making sure they're clean. And we do have everything's typically cooked on site here. Our auxiliary at our VFW post here in town, 4075, they make a lot of food for us and bring it up here during the retreats. And we've had other American Legion folks out here cooking, and I mean it's kind of and we've had team guys out here cooking. I mean, it's just we get a lot of people when they have the time to do it, and then life gets in the way, or just their life evolves, I shouldn't say get in the way, and they just don't have that time anymore. But we're always looking for more people to come out to help out with what we're doing.
I can attest to it is a lean, mean machine that Steve's running. I've been out there. I've seen him. He's dragging wood around. He works as hard or harder than anybody else. So there's not a lot of fat on this program. And it's if you're out there and you're thinking, well, I can only give $10. Man, if 1,000 of our listeners gave $10, don't think that it's an insult to give a little bit if you have it, because this is a really good cause. And I mean, helping veterans is just something that really keeps me coming back, honestly, at the end of the day. And I know it's such a beautiful place. And there's a lodge house kind of thing. I don't know what to call it, but it's a really cool room with a bar, and the Jim Beam did a lot of the woodwork. It's really beautiful place to hang out, have a fire, just eat, fellowship, all that. So
Jim Beam. So Jim Beam, I don't know how many people know this, but they employ almost a quarter of their employees are veterans.
Yeah.
Which is a huge number if you consider the actual population of the United States and the percentage that are veterans.
Sure.
And so they have their own organization called Beam Vets. And they came out a few years ago and in 2021 helped us renovate our bathhouse and shower facility, because at the time we were considering doing couples retreats, but it was like, well, we only got 2 bathrooms and 1 shower. We're talking 10 people, 5 males, 5 females.
Yeah.
or it could, our, when I say couples, I don't mean they got to be husband and wife. It can be an adult, like Vietnam era or Korean era veteran with a adult child that is their care person, or vice versa. OEF, OIF vet who's being taken care of by his, elder parents. So
Yeah.
there's we see a whole lot of different like combinations come through. And then there's also the vets that are married,
Yeah.
so you got the male and female veteran that coming together, and
Yeah.
our program's slightly different for that weekend, for the support person than the veteran. The veteran does the exact same thing that we do during a male or female retreat. And then the support person, the difference for them is they go through SAVE training, which is the VA's new veteran focused suicide awareness training. And I haven't sat through it yet because I'm always out with the veterans doing a work project, but I've had my staff sit through it and they're like, dude, this is awesome. I'm like, I really need to sit through it one of these
Yeah.
days just to see what it is. Cause I don't ever incorporate anything into what we do unless I've tried it once myself.
Yeah.
And I don't want to all of a sudden, even though I've had such a lot of positive feedback from it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, I just want to make sure it doesn't like taint something that we're already doing.
Yeah, for sure.
It could be enough to trigger someone just a little bit, where the rest of their stay here is just like, not as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the challenge. The number one thing that veterans are faced, the big elephant in the room for those out there, if you don't know this, is suicide rates for veterans. We've lost more veterans to suicide than we did in combat, which is, it's unacceptable, but it's anyway, anything we can do to go in a direction that just give people purpose. And I think that's a big one. I think a lot of people I've talked about in operator syndrome with Patrick is that sometimes guys and gals get so their identity becomes just being a soldier. And they think that's all I'm good at. That's all I'm ever going to be good at. And that's where I get my value. And that's all great. I mean, who you are to people who serve in any capacity as a veteran, but there's so much more to life than just being a warrior or a fighter. And this highlights all of that.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. We're coming up on time. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm having allergy issues. But I want
to hit real quick on the suicide issue.
Yeah.
So the population is pretty misinformed on that. And I say that because the 22 a day or 16 a day, that's based off of VA numbers. The VA gets their numbers from within the VA system. There's a lot of veterans that don't utilize the VA. And so I had the opportunity to be introduced to this veteran female that runs not only a bunch of hospitals in Arizona, but she also, I don't know if she's doing it now based on what's going on in the Middle East, but she ran the entire medical care system for the country of Jordan. Well, she's well connected with, hot civilian hospitals all around the country. And we were having a conversation and she asked me, what do you think the actual suicide rate is not based off of the VA's numbers, but based off of everybody's numbers? And I was like, I don't know, maybe 22. I was like, it can't be more than like 32. I'm like, 32 a day? She says more like 44 a day. And I was just like, God, man, are you kidding me? Yeah. She's like, well, in Arizona alone, only 18% of veterans utilize the VA. And I was just like, that's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So, which is probably on the lower end because Arizona did have that bad stigma with veterans dying in hospital beds and hallways and stuff like that not too long ago.
Right.
And so I don't know what the average it would be per state that veterans are actually utilizing the VA when you're talking the number that low. I mean, I would assume that that's towards the lowest end, but so there's just a lot more out there that is not being reported because the VA only reports on themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't understand why they don't tap into the civilian sector side and get the actual real number. But
yeah, really good point. Yeah, it's just it's out of control. And well, so if one more time, it's campbrownbearusa.org. For those who want to check it out, volunteer, give. I'd like to be more involved. Talk is cheap, but I want to get up there and hang out and give my 2 cents and help out. But Steve, thanks so much for coming on and just talking about your your new life there.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Steve. And
Yeah,
if you ever want to do a follow up or something, let me know.
for
Uh,
sure.
there's still plenty to talk about at this place, and I'm sure I
Yeah.
got another story or two that'll pop in my head.
Oh yeah, a couple probably.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, brother, and appreciate all of the input.
All right, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you.